All right. We have one item on the agenda tonight, which is our discussion regarding an election for a water rate increase. And this is a follow-up from a previous meeting, so I will turn it over to our Director of Utilities, Chris Mattingly.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council. From our last meeting on November 2nd, Utilities staff and Reftelis worked to refine the three options for a rate increase for your consideration tonight. And our goal is we hope to leave here with a package that we all agree on, that this is what we'll take forward to our voters in April for a water rate increase to fund the items I had mentioned in the summer. We're looking for disinfection. DEQ is going to require us to do disinfection for the groundwater. The other big one is AMI, is advanced metering infrastructure, and that'll help us run the cash register for our community, read the meters more accurately. We see a lot of benefits being able to promote conservation through that, give us more data. A lot of benefits to that package. And then another $1 million for pipe replacement, because we're getting behind on pipes that need to be replaced, as you saw going up flood. We keep repairing and just patching things, but we're not able to replace pipe. And then the last is like a little 3.5% on expenses in the past, just for gas, chemicals, things that are going up. So tonight, with Todd Cristiano with Reftelis, he will do the presentation, and we'll answer questions afterward.
Thank you.
Mayor, members of council, my name is Todd Cristiano. As you may recall, I was here about a month ago to talk about connection fees and financial plans and all the things water and wastewater utility finance is concerned. And so, like Chris had mentioned, I'm back here today to focus in on one yet other aspect of financial planning for the water and wastewater utility. So I'll jump right in. As you may recall, last time we were here, we talked about connection fees and financial plan. Tonight, we're going to talk about rate design. And the rate design, that's how we get the money from the customers, the rate structure, what the bill looks like. And you can see here we've got three circles, and there's two small circles, connection fees and financial plan. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that because we did that last time. We're really going to focus on rate design, and I'm going to walk you through kind of the process that we go through when looking at different sort of rate structure alternatives. But first, let's just review quickly what we talked about in November 2nd meeting. And those are connection fees. We have the current water connection fees here. They're based on meter size. They increase as meter size increases, and that's due to higher level of capacity required to provide service to larger meters. You think of an industrial building versus a small coffee house or something like that. And we came up with three alternatives to fund future infrastructure. And we won't go into too much detail here. We can answer some questions regarding them, but we have three alternatives here: the Lake Thunderbird augmentation, or purchasing additional water from Oklahoma City, which means that there's less infrastructure required, but more operating expense required because we're just purchasing water from Oklahoma City, so it's a balance. And the last one was drilling additional wells at Garber Wellington site. So three different ways to kind of achieve the same capacity needs in the future. Obviously, all come at a different cost. So when we put our numbers together, looking at those costs for each one of those alternatives, we came up with these numbers here. You can see the existing at the top is $1,000 for a 3/4 inch meter. Compare that to the alternatives at a 3/4 inch meter as well. You can see the augmentation was the highest, followed by the OKC water and the wells option. And we did a quick survey last time, and we'll just highlight here, Let's just highlight where these alternatives fit within the larger community or your peer utilities. Right now, Norman, where it says 1 there, that's existing, and that contains the water and sewer component there. And obviously, those other three alternatives we came up with are higher. But let's keep in mind that we don't know what other communities are doing. They may be haven't raised their connection fees in some time. They might be using some other source of revenue to fund those capital improvement programs. They might be doing all sorts of things there that we just don't know, or they just haven't raised them in quite a while. So that's where the city would sit in this survey too. Whoops, wrong direction. Okay, so that was the connection fee. That summarizes the connection fee process we talked about last time. We have the financial planning process, what we had gone through. We talked about a couple of alternatives. There's a number of steps that goes into the financial planning of this. We have to take in all the budget information, the customer billing information, look at your existing debt, figure out if we're going to have proposed debt to help fund projects and meet debt service coverage and meet target reserves. All these balls that are in the air, and we need to find a way to optimize that to come down to a financial scenario that's going to work best for the community and the customers, as well as meeting the city's requirements. And we looked at the capital improvement program. This is what we built the financial plan around, was this capital improvement program over the next 10 years. We have a number of projects that are going to be funded through state loans or earmarked for state loans, and some are going to be cash financed. And by doing a combination of those two, helps us mitigate huge spikes in rate increases and helps kind of level the playing field in terms of having our expenditures be smooth across the study period. And so if we do that, if we don't look at state loans and don't look at revenue adjustments over the study period, these are all the expenditures you would have over the 10-year period, and your revenues are the blue line there. You'd obviously be not meeting any of your requirements, and you'd be having a negative fund balance, and just a lot of not good things would be happening to the utility financially. But incorporating revenue adjustments and balancing those state loans and cash financing and all those different things that we need to consider when looking at a financial plan, this is what our financial plan looked like in terms of having some revenue adjustments every 3 years to keep up with expenditures and meet all of your financial targets and performance measures. So that summarizes the financial plan part of what we discussed last time. So now I'm going to dive into the new component, or the new item we didn't get a chance to talk about on November 2nd, and that's rate design or rate structures. When we look at a rate structure, the city has for water utility, has a two-part rate structure. There's a service charge, monthly service charge. Regardless of how much water you use, you get charged the service charge. And then there's a volume rate. As you use more, you pay more. And so what's covered in those two components? That's often a question we get from council, like, well, service charge, well, how do you know what's in what? Well, the monthly service charge typically recovers the cost of billing, cost of sending out a bill, processing it. You have some customer service costs, you have paper, you have the stamps, and even maybe a portion of the costs associated with doing the online billing. Some utilities might recover a portion of their capital in the fixed charge because they have some debt service that's fixed, and they want to just be certain that they're going to have sufficient funding to pay that debt service and have some revenue stability. So that's typically what you'd find in a service charge. Oh, and other things like the cost of a new meter, or the field service crews that go out to read the meters and replace the meters, or even work with customers on if there's a faulty meter or something like that. Those sorts of things would be typically recovered in the service charge. The volume charge recovers everything else. It basically recovers the cost to collect the water from the wells, send it to treat it, and then distribute it to customers. That's basically what the volume rate is going to recover. So in our proposed rate structure alternatives we've talked about this evening, we're retaining that two-component structure, this monthly service charge and the volume rates. So your current residential rate structure, and the majority of your customers are residential, is you have a fixed monthly charge regardless of meter size. Many communities have a fixed charge that varies by meter size, but the City of Norman's fixed charge is the same for all meter sizes, and that's $6. There's also another charge called a capital improvement fee, or a capital improvement charge, or CIC. That's $1.50 that obviously goes to pay for capital-related projects each year. So the total fixed charge or monthly service charge for a residential customer is $7.50. If you use 0 gallons, it's $7.50. The second component to it is the volume rate structure. And we have we call a fixed tiered or fixed block structure, meaning as you use more, once you kick up into these next blocks, that incremental amount of usage will be at a higher rate. So for example, if you use 5,000 gallons or less, it's going to be $3.35 per 1,000 gallons. If you use 6,000 gallons, the first 5,000 gallons we charge at $3.35 per 1,000 gallons. That next 1,000 gallons, which falls into that second block, the 5,000 to 15,000, that 1,000 gallons will be charged at $4.10. So I want to be clear that it's not that if you fall in that second tier that all of the water gets charged at $4.10. So it's incrementally, so the concept of as you use more, you pay more. This is a conservation-oriented structure to help promote wise water use, and it does that through sending a pricing signal, because as you use more, your rate goes up. Commercial is similar, but a little more tricky. Again, we have the fixed charge, which does not vary by meter size. It's $6. We have the capital improvement charge for commercial, but instead of being just a dollar amount of $1.50, it's actually a percentage of the total bill. So you have your total bill for commercial, you're a customer, you have a total bill of $100. A percentage of that is considered the capital improvement charge that gets added onto it, then there's your total bill. They also have a tiered structure, 2 tiers, but what's different about the tiers here on commercial is that residential, as I mentioned, has a fixed tier, meaning it's 0 to 5, 5 to 15, 15 to 20, and then over 20. It's that fixed tier structure for all customers in residential, regardless of how big your house is, your lot, how much water you use, 0 to 5, 5 to 15, 15 to 20, over 20. Commercial's a little different. It bases it on some individual usage characteristics for every customer. And it's called AWC, average winter consumption. And so what this structure does, it looks at a customer's average winter consumption from December to February and says, okay, what's your average winter consumption? It's 10,000 gallons. Great. So customer A has an average winter consumption of 10,000. Commercial customer B has an average winter consumption of 20,000. So block 1 for customer A would be 0 to 10,000 at $3.80. Anything above 10,000 would be $4.20. Customer B, who has an average winter consumption of 20,000, their first block would be 0 to 20,000, charged at $3.80 per 1,000 gallons. Over that 20,000 gallon mark, be charged $4.20 per 1,000 gallons. And so why do we have a rate structure like that? Why would we want to go through having something like that? Well, the whole idea is that we want to, one of the items here on AWC is to encourage water conservation, but with commercial, because there's such a wide variety of type of customers. So for example, a Starbucks, standalone Starbucks, Chick-fil-A, or a car wash, that their usage patterns are so very different that by having this tiered structure that's a little more customized to them can help send the appropriate conservation signal to have the wise water use and conserve water based on the prices signal you're sending through these 2 tiers. So unlike residential, which is fixed tier, we would call this an individualized tiered structure. So those are the 2 types of rate structures for your 2 largest classes, residential and commercial, which includes institutional and industrial as well. So that's the existing rate structures. So that's what we've started with when we started looking at some alternatives here. Go back. So when we look at a rate structure, the idea is that, well, we can just throw a bunch of darts on the wall and say, well, we should have a fixed charge of $20, and let's do tier 1 at $3.50. No, let's do tier 2 at $20. And that doesn't work quite well, just looking at numbers and saying the rate structure should be. So what we like to do, and we discussed this with Chris and Nathan, was what should the rate structure achieve? What are we trying to achieve with a certain type of rate structure? And so we call those pricing objectives. And if we can nail down the pricing objectives, we can come back with some alternatives saying, here's a rate structure that addresses some of these pricing objectives. Now, the challenge is that some of these pricing objectives are compete with one another. So for example, if you want a revenue stability, you'd have a fixed charge of $100 a month for everybody, and that's it. But then if there is an affordability concern, that would be problematic for them. So it kind of butts heads with one another. So anyway, here are some common pricing objectives. Revenue stability, and that's obviously you want to make sure that your revenues are stable year to year. And looking at a couple of years ago, the city's water revenues, there was a little bounce up and down. So there is a little bit of revenue instability there. Equity between classes, that simply means that the residential class is paying their fair share, the commercial class is paying their fair share. Equity within a class, which is a little more challenging, is, well, making sure that to the extent possible, the low volume users are paying for their cost to serve them, the high volume users are paying for the cost to serve them. And so it's called intra-class equity, or equity between large volume and low volume users. Equity between existing and new customers, this gets back to the connection fee. That are our existing customers subsidizing growth, or is growth paying their fair share, and having that balance between new and existing customers through the rate structure. Conservation pricing signal, I brought up the four-tiered structure, which is what you have the four-tiered structure for residential, you have the two-tiered for commercial, is an example. Demand management, this is also a tool which, if you have peak demands in the summer that are really pushing the envelope of your system's capacity, you can have rate structures that help kind of tamp that demand down and help them distribute maybe to other periods during the year through pricing. Essential use affordability, the exact opposite of revenue stability. We want to make sure that those low volume users are paying the lowest possible cost to get the best water service. But with revenue stability, kind of counters that a little bit. Customer understanding, this is kind of a gimme. You don't want to have a rate structure you can't understand. I have seen a couple of those in my experience. I worked with a utility in New Mexico that had a 40-tiered rate structure. Not sure why, but it was 40 tiers. Customer impact, and customer impact's interesting in that this only happens once. When you make a big change to a rate structure, and let's say we went from a 4-tiered structure to a 40-tiered structure, right? That the change in the impact over the first year would be significant. Some people would go down, some people would go up, and it would just be, all over the board. So this is the one-time change. And so what you might do if you're going to have major customer impacts from a rate structure you've developed, maybe you transition that in over a couple of years to help kind of smooth that bounce around. Ease of administration implementation, this is critical. It's great to come up with a really fantastic rate structure only to find out after putting all your efforts and hours and stakeholder hours and council time, realizing the billing system can't do what you want to do. So it's always something you want to check out first. But obviously ease of administration, because this is one thing that a lot don't think about, is that your customer service group has to explain this rate structure. And they have to be able to explain, the field service crew, they're the first line of defense. They have to be out there to explain a rate structure, and it has to be easy to implement as well. So those are all different types of pricing objectives, and the idea is to go through a workshop and look at which of these are important, and then grading the rate structures. And obviously it's somewhat subjective, but there's some objective measures you can look at to find out, well, did these alternatives we came up with through these pricing objectives meet the goals of what we're trying to do here? So given that, we went through a little bit of modified version of this with staff. One of the key things here I want to stress is that obviously we want a rate structure that's going to recover your revenue. It'd be silly to design something saying, no, we only want to recover 30% of what we need. That doesn't make sense. Same thing with defensibility. We're not going to come up with something that is not defensible. So I call these kind of throwaway slides because we have to do this anyway. We're not going to not do them. So we talked about this a bit, and because we're not looking to make major changes to the rate structure because it's working. There are components of it that are working, but you can always look and tweak and adjust things to, fit with the times because you haven't adjusted in quite some time. So we came up with these 6, revenue stability being an important one. We want to retain the conservation pricing signal. We also want to be mindful of the essential use affordability for those lower volume customers that have challenges associated with paying their utility bills. We want to maintain the existing between existing and new customers. Obviously, we want to minimize the customer impact and ease of administration implementation. Now, the ones on the right-hand side are kind of what we need to do that anyway. So the real focus here was on revenue stability, conservation pricing signal, and essential use affordability. So some alternatives we came up with for residential. We have 3. Alternative one is we're going to retain the existing structure. Residential fixed charge doesn't vary by meter size, going to retain the $1.50 CIC charge, but we're going to increase everything across the board. So if our financial plan increase indicated that we needed a 25% revenue adjustment, we're going to take the existing rates you have, add 25% to them, done. Alternative two is a structure that was discussed, I believe Chris discussed it, we call it the July retreat rates because they were discussed back in July. And again, we're still retaining the same structure. We've just adjusted the rates and the volume in the tiers and increased the service charge a bit to just get that little bit extra bit of revenue stability. We didn't want to bring it up too high to have that huge impact, but do this kind of incremental. Alternative three was looking at, well, what happens if we just increase, really go for full revenue stability, make that the critical item of making the change to the rate structure, put that first to the list of being the most important. So we have alternative three, higher fixed charge, basically increases revenue stability. So those are the three. Now with commercial, it's kind of a fallout. So no matter whatever fixed charge we've come up with that comes out of the residential alternatives, the commercial is going to adopt that same fixed charge. And the rates will just be adjusted to recover the commercial costs. So there's really no change in the rate structure or anything like that. We're simply just shifting where we might be getting the money for commercial through more in the service charge versus the volume rate. So those are the rate structures we came up with. Again, not major changes. We're not doing open heart surgery on the rate structures. We're looking at just kind of making a few tweaks here and there to kind of address some of the issues that we identified as being important. So when we take these rate structure alternatives, here's what we did with them. We came up with the rate structure alternatives by looking at the pricing objectives, determining what's important, saying, okay, what does our rate structure need to look like? And the goal is, all right, with these rate structures for fiscal year 23, from a financial planning perspective, we went back and sharpened our pencils from the last time we met, said we need to recover $4.7 million in fiscal year 23. And that's not a random number. Chris just mentioned a couple of those things, but we have to fund the AMI project, which will be partially bond financed, and some regulatory disinfection, and some other costs as well. So totals up to $4.7 million. So when we look at our fiscal year 23 projections, we'll need to recover a total of $24.7 million, which includes that $4.7 million. So the total desired or projected revenue we need to get with the increase is $24.7 million. And based on the split of how you're recovering revenue from your two classes today, 19.9 would come from residential and 4.8 would come from commercial. That percentage split is not any different than what you're getting now under your existing rate. So, yes? In total, it's been around 19 million or so, and there was a bump in 2020, which may have been weather, but also may have been COVID as well, because there was a bump in residential. That's one thing we went back and sharpened our pencils on. We were looking at that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, I thought you had a question. Okay. So now the 4.7, and actually the whole 24.7, we're going to recover that through the fixed charge and the volumetric rates. And so when we look at our rate structure alternatives, the 4.7 is kind of baked into the total amount that we need to recover. So there's a lot of numbers here, a lot of alternatives. We have the description on the left here, the monthly service charge. This is residential. All customers, I mean all customers by meter size for residential, and that's mainly 3/4. A majority of your customers are 3/4 inch customers, which is the smallest meter. Current rates are $7.50. That includes the capital improvement charge. And you can see block 1 through block 4, the rates increase as you use more. So it goes from $3.35 per thousand. Once you hit over 20,000 gallons, you're paying $6.80 for that, anything over 20,000 gallons. Alternative 1, we've just increased the amount by the financial plan increase we've come up with. And so we go from $7.50 to $9.30. And that includes the capital improvement charge. However, the capital improvement charge does not get affected by the rate increase because it's kind of a separate line item on the bill. So it's still $1.50. The $4.20 here is increased from Block 1 all the way through Block 4, $8.50. So, a difference of a couple of dollars there between the tiers. So alternative 2 is July Retreat, and this was an alternative that was developed back in July, and we've made some based on assumptions and whatnot. So we've just taken what the values that Chris came up with, and we plugged them in here, and it's $9.50 for the fixed charge, and then $4.50, $5.50, $6.50, and $8 for blocks 1 through 4. Finally, the higher fixed charge, which gets us up to $11.50, that's a $4 increase from what they're paying now, which could have an impact on those low-volume customers. When you do that, you have $11.50 fixed charge, your volume rates are going to go down because you're still recovering the same amount of money overall. But now you're recovering more from the fixed charge, so the volume rates don't have to be as high. So you can see that here, that of the 3 alternatives, $4.10 in that first tier is lower than the other 2 alternatives. But we're still recovering the same amount of money for residential in any one of these alternatives. Alternative 1, 2, and 3, we're recovering the same amount of money, which in theory is $19.9 million. Okay, so those are the rate structure alternatives. Again, I want to stress that when we looked at the pricing objectives, we didn't want to just throw darts at the wall and see what stuck. We wanted to be have a deliberative process and talk about, well, what's really important here before we come back with alternatives, because I could have shown up here with 30 that would not have been helpful. Oops. Well, whoop. Where did we go here? So when we look at some bill impacts here, we've got 4 little clusters here. And the clusters are the total bill of just water at 5,000 gallons, 10,000 gallons, 15,000 gallons, and 20,000 gallons. Now, I want to stress that a large percentage of your customers, or bills, I'm sorry, large percentage of the residential bills use 5,000 gallons or less. So a majority of those bills are multiple months each year for many customers. And you can see, just like we showed with the rate structures on the previous page, that they go up a little bit. The July Retreat is one of the highest, and then it goes down a little bit for the increased fixed charge. Sorry. So if we look at this in terms of a tabular format, boy, this mouse is sensitive. I want to show some tabulars, whereas graphical here, you can see for each level of consumption there, the 73% of bills are 5,000 gallons or less. This is residential, and then has 0 to 5,000, and then the last 3 rows are for 10, 15, and 20,000 gallons. We're really focused on the 5,000 and less in increments of 4, 3, 2, and 1, because there are so many bills that are at that level. We wanted to show what that impact was between the existing and then the various alternatives. So when we look at, well, that's great. We've come up with these alternatives. Do they do anything? Are they going to meet some of the objectives that we're trying to target? Now, again, I had mentioned earlier that part of that is subjective, and part of that you can assign some values to by looking at how much revenue comes in certain tiers and that sort of thing. So we have the across-the-board July Retreat and higher fixed charge of those alternatives on the left here. We have kind of our important pricing objectives across the top there: revenue stability, conservation, essential use affordability, equity, customer impact, ease of administration. And I'll just go through these briefly. With revenue stability, the higher fixed charge obviously going to be the best, because you're collecting most in your fixed charge, and you're still recovering a lot of volume in that first tier, which is pretty much guaranteed revenue. You're going to pretty much have customers using a few thousand gallons each month. So in combination of those two things, that's where you're going to get a little more revenue stability, or a little bit of revenue from that fixed charge. July Retreat and across the board, about the same. And these are kind of subtle differences, because like I said, we're not making huge changes here. These are subtle differences. Conservation, just by looking at the bills in the higher tiers, the July Retreat has that higher conservation message than maybe the others do. Essential use affordability, obviously, if they're the across the board, when you look at the straight increases across the board there, you look at the low volume bills, less than around 3,000 or less, those are a little bit lower than the July retreat and higher fixed charge version there. And equity, you know, when we talk about the interclass and intra-class equity, we're not really shifting that much. We're still recovering the same amount of residential as we did before, as we did for commercial. The equity between a lower volume and a higher volume customer probably does not change that much if we were to look at some, you know, quantitative results from that. Customer impact, obviously, across the board gets the highest. When we look, I believe, at 5,000 gallons, it has one of the lower rates compared to the other two. And ease of administration, they're all fairly easy to implement because it's the same structure as you currently have for residential. So they all get a check mark. So what this is basically saying is that some of these had hit some of the key objectives better than others. It gives you a little bit of a roadmap to have a discussion and say, well, which one's really important to us and which one do we want more focus on? Moving on to commercial real quick. Like I said, not many changes here. The service charge is going to be the same basically for this group here. And the volume rates of Block 1 and Block 2, and the Block 1s vary by the average winter consumption for each customer. So not a lot of movement here with commercial. But I do want to show you when we do that, when we look at the different types of commercial customers, because they do vary quite a bit. We pulled up three: a fast food restaurant. This is a place where you can get supersized fries and that sort of thing, and we have a car wash up there and a convenience store. And you can see under each of the alternatives that we have a winter and summer here. We just pulled, I think, February and then a July for summer to show what the comparison would be between the lower volume and higher volume. And it follows the same trajectory as the residentials do, going up and being lower for that last tier. What's interesting is the car wash uses about the same amount of water in the wintertime as they do the summertime, and that's, I found it to be true in a lot of communities, that in the wintertime, people like to have clean cars just as much in the summertime. And the convenience store here as well. So this just gives you a little perspective on the potential impact to a mix of commercial customers. Of course, it's going to be different for any type of commercial customer based on their type of service they provide and the amount of water they use in their service. So that concludes the presentation on the connection fees, financial plan, and really focused on the rate design this evening. So,
Who's got questions? Okay, Councilmember Foreman?
So when we're talking about this, what are we talking about an increase for the developers on the connectivity fees? Have we talked about increasing that, or is this just, we're simply shifting this onto the residents?
Okay, so this one is just for today's customers.
Okay.
This presentation. And we just think, since we're going to go for a rate increase, you guys, maybe we do bring a connection fee increase also, but that'll be in addition, or that'll be separate of this. This is going to be what we need to vote on and put it on the April ballot. But we were thinking maybe by March, if you guys, we can still discuss connection fees. And really that one's for the additional water that we'll need later. And we can continue to discuss that and make it fair, since we are going to raise the communities if we vote this through. Then the connection fees will also go up some percentage, some portion, and that we can all be discussing that part.
So these rates that were presented don't even take that into consideration. And so my issue with that is, as we all know, that Oklahoma is the only state in the nation that does not get municipal revenue from property taxes, which is horrible, but whatever. And so when we add new developments, then we are increasing fire, we are increasing police and waste management services, the infrastructure, the maintenance of the roads, repair over time. That shifts 100% onto the resident without any recouping that from property taxes. That all goes to county, and county's not putting out your fires or picking up your trash. So I have a hard time looking at this on the front end, knowing that this big shift to people's bills, which are going to be sort of relatively high for some people, without even taking into account the connectivity fees that are That should be more shifted on the developers too. If we're not talking about them simultaneously, then I'm gonna be a hard pass on trying to get this approved.
Okay.
Councilmember Foreman, and just the recognition that the homework is taking place on both fronts. The realization that the connection fees that developers pay is adopted by the council and doesn't require the voter approval. So this is the piece for the voter approval. And with an April ballot anticipated, our opportunity to say, okay, council, of these three choices, what's your pleasure for us to develop the ordinance that will wind up as that ballot question? That'll be seen again in April when the ballot is voted on, and between now and then, we do want to bring you the other piece of the puzzle. So they can move through the systems for voter approval on rates, council approval on connection fees, and hopefully by the time we get to April, they come alive about the.
Right, and I understand, but we do have to get 70 days, I believe, is the notice that we have to give the election board. So I would want very much before then to see them coupled with one another.
Councilmember Foreman, I think there was a presentation on the connection fees back on November the 2nd that they discussed, that has been presented to council. The goal is to bring them forward at the same time. They've taken all of that into consideration when they picked these rates so that it balances. You just aren't seeing it tonight. It will come back to you, though, in January or February. You just have to have them adopted before the rate increase. But in order to make the April ballot, it has to go first and second reading in January to give notice in time. So it's more of a timing issue. You are going to increase both. They've looked at both. It's balanced for the most part. You just aren't seeing that part tonight.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we have the connectivity fee thing resolved before then.
Councilmember Holman?
Thank you. So on that same note, the way I understand it maybe is that regardless of what we might raise connection fees to for new development, this is the rate that's needed to support existing development. So even if we raise connection rates, fees, we still would need to raise what's proposed here to support existing stuff. Is that?
Exactly, yeah. The existing customers we already have a piping system, a treatment plant, everything's in place. The pipes, we have 600 miles of pipe, water lines. 300 miles of that is made out of metal, cast iron or ductile iron. Those are the ones that keep corroding and failing on us. I mean, the last one that hurt me was Tecumseh, 24-inch leading to the hospital, Land Run, I believe it's called. That whole shopping center was out of water. It's a 24-foot deep metal line. We hurried and dug the hole and got it back in service because they were all disrupted. And all we could do is put a clamp on there. That 24-inch is still 24 feet deep, metal line with corrosion problems, and we're worried. Those are the projects we got to continue to fix. So this rate increase is to try to repair and maintain what we have today. It's not the new water. The connection fee will be more driven towards the new water, additional wells, buying additional from Oklahoma City, or putting the money into reuse water to treat it high quality to put it in the lake.
That's the real distinction I want to make sure residents, voters, everybody understands too, is that what we're talking about asking you to increase your bill for is for our current system and needs, and the council has the ability to increase connection fees to address new development that we know is happening, that we need to expand capacity, and so that we have the ability to adjust that. But I think a lot of folks and residents out in the general public may not understand that, how our system here works and all that. So I think that is a real pertinent point, as Councilmember Foreman brings up, to make sure the folks know that what the rate increase proposals for, and then what the council, what we might be expected to do over the next few months when it comes to increasing.
Yes, and let me, it's a good point. Maybe some have noticed the long flood leaving town north. We repaired that line. It's a 16-inch going north along the railroad tracks. over 20 repairs this summer alone. None of those did we replace pipe. Again, we dug it up, put a clamp on it, Band-Aid, and left it there. We now have a project replacing the total length of that line. It's the price, $2.8 million. That's what it cost to do that section. But we were late, and meanwhile, we had to go disrupt businesses along 77. We tore up driveways, curbs. We have to pay for all that with the water money, and we didn't replace any line. The line is still there. So that we just feel like we're getting behind on the replacement projects. Had another one over behind Ellison's, I think by former council member Kate Bierman's house. Everyone saw it, geyser up one evening. It damaged the attorney's parking lot there. Again, we have to pay all that money to fix the pavement, all that, because we're not getting to the old metal lines and getting them replaced in time. After our income on our budget, we bring in $24 million a year in water fund. We have $13 million expenses. We have loan payments about $5.8 million. When we get down to the bottom line, we only have about $4.2 million left to spend on capital repairs, improvements. The other ones we like to do too is when Sean in Public Works redo Porter. We know those are old metal lines right there by Kate Bierman's house, right? So we worry that those are going to blow up. We don't want to put a new capital improvement, new street over old metal lines because we're afraid we'll have to go dig them up when they fail. So I only have that $4 million. I can't fix the flood water line, the Tecumseh water line, and also prepare for Sean's when he does the road work repair.
Right.
So it's just really, that's why we're feeling tight in utilities on the water fund. So.
Okay. And of the alternatives, I know you presented us the July alternative back at the retreat. Of what's presented, what is your opinion of which one we should go
Of
with?
these, I'm not a rate maker, but I took a stab at it, and I was trying to, I knew I needed $4.7 million, so I raised $2 on the base fee and thought that would get me $1 million guaranteed money if I don't sell a drop of water. I was worried if I put it all in the over 20,000 gallons, people might curtail their use, and then I don't get that money, and if I go get a loan to make a loan payment, I need that money to come in. So Todd is a professional. He redid it based on what he thinks is defensible, probably either his first one or mine. They're the two I like.
Oh, I like the third one. I mean, I like being able to raise revenue and be able to do these things and address these problems, but I do have definite heartburn about raising the rate by $4.
On that low face. That's a very safe
Yeah.
bet. I mean, that's a nice safe bet economically, but
Yeah.
boy, it hurts the fixed income folks that don't even buy water and they have to pay the extra $4.
Okay.
Can we put the three options on the screen?
Yeah.
So, would you say the proposal you gave us at the retreat, is that still one you would prefer? out of
It
these
works. I mean, yeah, that's because it's mine, but.
They seem to they all have, right. But I mean, you're the director of the department, so.
Yeah, I think honestly, I could make a need for more money, a bigger rate increase. I kind of sized it up too, the 4.7. I kind of I'm thinking this is what we maybe can afford as a community, a first step for increasing it a little bit. And then we will need additional ones, I think. Again, with 300 miles of metal line to be replaced, we're estimating $100 to $200 million over the next so many years. We're not going to get that in the next year or two, right?
Right.
So we're just going to start taking little bites at it because we know it's coming down. So I do think it's okay. It's a good start. And then after 5-6 years, we'll probably be back here and looking for another one.
Right, and in the last 15 years, we've only had 2 increases.
Exactly. We had one in
2006 and
2006. We failed in 2010. We had one in 15, and now it's been 6 years.
Yeah.
Things have all gone up. Nathan has a nice graph. Can you pull that up? It's a nice graph showing, we actually went past revenues, actual, and then we did as you can see, the revenues are the black line. And then the blue line sloping and gaining on the right, that's our actual expenditures. And you see we've outclimbed you see that revenue is lower than the expenditures, and that's why we're feeling the heat. We're feeling tight on our budgets. and realizing we can't say yes to too many additional projects. We're gonna have to just really limit what we can do additional going forward. So, but if we get a revenue increase, 4.7 million, would take that up to about 28, 29 million a year. That covers our current spending.
Okay.
So, and it would put us, make us have pause again.
Well, I definitely want to make sure that everything's fully funded, but while also being conscious of increasing rates on our lowest.
Yeah,
income
and the
end
orange
users.
also just shows the loan payments. Those are actual loans we've taken, and you have to pay those. I mean,
Right. Okay, thanks, Chris.
Yep, and you asked for the 3 rates,
Mhm.
so.
There you go. Okay, Councilmember Schuler?
Yeah, so I would just like to echo what Councilmember Foreman and Councilmember Holman, the questions kind of about coupling these two, our raising the rates for our residents and then also with our connection fees. And so I thank you for the clarification on what's paying for what. I think that's a really important distinction for people to understand. That was going to be one of my questions. But as we start to look at which alternative, which plan we're going to pick, when we look at our residential rates and then our commercial rates, are we tied into alternative one across the board for both of them? I don't mean the across the board alternate one, but say like we pick alternate one for our residential rates, do we have to pick alternative one for our commercial rates, or are we looking at different avenues? Does that change anything? Or should they stay together?
That's a good question. I think you could choose different ones. The challenge is that you'd end up having a different fixed charge for residential and a different fixed charge for commercial, which might beg the question. But again, the fixed charge is, the incremental change in the fixed charge is fairly low, so maybe immaterial, right?
Yeah, and
So-
Nathan's reminding me, and Anthony probably will too, that would be tough on us
Okay.
as far as administering.
That was going to be my next question. Would that be tough on us as a city to administer different rates to our commercial and our residential rates? More difficult, okay. And then I had a similar question about preference, but you've answered that as well. And I would just state that, my preference would ideally be less impact on our residents that are using, less, and our residents that are on fixed incomes and things that would have, that larger fixed rate on the front end that could really impact our residents. So I think it's really important that we balance that and really think about that. And so my preference would be one of the alternate one or alternative two when we look at that. And so it does seem like they're fairly similar. Is there any way to distinguish them for us as we look between the two in terms of how that gets us rates? Is there any dependency on how people use the water? Like if we have people using less water, are they just so similar that it's not really going to matter much? Or are we just pinching pennies?
No, if you look at the 850 on the block 4 for alt 1, that's the one that it does put more on the people that use more, but it also, if they curtail their use, we might not get as much income from that block. And so you can see on alt 2, that's only $8 in that bigger unit. And you'll see it on block 1 and block 2 a little larger, you see. So I got it over on the 5,000 to 15,000 group.
So I guess this begs the question, how concerned about usage are we? Are we more concerned about making money, or are we more concerned about conserving our water source, which we already know that we're tapped out and we're using too much water, which will bring in the conversation about our connection fees and augmentation and where are we getting our additional water. So I think it's really a values question at that point. Am I maybe correct in
No, I agree.
asking that?
No, that's a good point.
Just a real quick point. I think Todd mentioned 73% of our bills are 5,000 or less. So this table kind of gives you a comparison between the two. So If you chose alt one, 73% of the bills are gonna be about $30. It'll go up about $6, whereas the other one, it'll go up, $1.70 more. So $1.70 difference is kind of the play on 70% of the bills, so.
Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Lynn?
All right, I just now thought of this a minute ago, but it seems to be a big concern about raising these rates for people on fixed income or not. Would it be possible to have, or if somebody verified their income with a city, that they have a capped rate that doesn't go above a certain percentage or a certain percent for a low income? I know other utility places, they have similar programs to that, that if you had a fixed income, the max your water bill would ever be would be within a limit. Does that make sense?
We already have a low-income discount that basically applies to the fixed rate at the top, and it's basically 20% off of that. And I would assume that the ordinance could be written that that would apply to the new rate structure as well. Now, as far as a cap at the top, that would be difficult to administer.
But so we're already doing that. So when we talk about this, there's already that program in place.
A low-income discount is
Yeah,
already. in
okay,
place.
so I see that as not being as concerning as what it might have been before if they're already getting a 20% discount. I know dollars matter and everything, and it's much easier for some people to pay than others, but if it's already being discounted, that alleviates that concern with me quite a bit. Other than that, I will tell you that an overwhelming chunk of my emails lately have been about water bills and people not very happy about them. So I know this needs to be done. I said back at the retreat that I'm an advocate for this. I will push for this. I gotta have some kind of help when people are like, hey, my water bill's $500. My water bill's $400. My water bill's $300. I'm usually paying $100. And then, that's been a whole lot of emails lately, and people not very happy with water. So I don't see how I give them some time in between their next $500 bill to try to get them to vote on this.
Speak to this. You want to speak to
I
this?
mean, I
one?
really don't know.
We get those emails, So I'll let Anthony take a stab at this. We're low on meter readers currently, but we've just hired 2.
Yeah, I think a lot of the emails have been related to the amount of estimated bills. And there has, in fact, been an increase in the percentage of bills that we're estimating lately just because of vacancies in our meter reading staff. And that has more to do with, one long-term employee who has been out on long-term sick leave, one who has been out on injury leave, 2 who have been quarantined because of COVID, and then we had about a 2-week period in there where our trucks were disabled because of the hailstorm. So, basically all of our meter reading trucks, the windshields were busted out, and so we couldn't use them until the windshields got fixed, and so that got us behind. So we think that this estimated reading problem is temporary. It was basically in September and October, which is affecting November bills, but it should work itself out over time when we get back up to full staff.
But how does that help with the estimated reading when they have several in a row? What's the solution to that? I know that's their actual water use or the estimated reading. I mean, because they're not going to forget that by April.
Right.
They're going to tell you to kick rocks when this comes to a vote, and it's going to fail miserably.
On an individual basis, any one of our customers who call in and we have had that estimated reading problem, we would offer to them to extend their billing period or their payment period over a period of months, 2-3 months, because we assume that when the meter was actually read, the estimated consumption was low. And so when it was actually read, it caught up, and that's what caused that one-time bill.
And I get that, but I'm not sure that they get that. And I'm just telling you, it's not a good feeling when we're trying to bring this forth. If this wasn't coming forth right now, I don't know, because there seems to be an awful lot of them, and they're talking to each other and they're talking to their neighbors. I just see this is going to be such an uphill challenge to get people to buy into this, saying, hey, we need it. You want your water to still come to your house and not service interruptions and all the infrastructure that needs to be fixed. I mean, I understand it, and I'm gonna communicate it the best I can. I just know that it's gonna be a challenge, because
I'll make it.
people are shaking their fists.
This was
And
not,
they think it's
I know.
us.
And it was not intended that this happened at this timing, but the AMI, the new metering system, it will, I hate to say eliminate estimates, but it's supposed to go to, what did they brag on, Nathan? 99% will be read and not estimated. So it's automation. Instead of sending people around picking up meter cans in cars with gasoline, you gotta do 41,000 reads a month. We've been down to 4 people doing that. And of course, they're not getting 41,000 read a month. And now our full staff is 6, so we're gonna add 2 back. And 2 of them will be new at it, so they probably won't be great at it for a little bit until we get them up and going. But these 6 people are reading 41,000 meters a month. If I can put these reads on top of the water towers that are next to these fire stations, we're lucky because our fire stations are next to them. There's already fiber optics going to the fire stations. So once the sensor reads the meter, it'll go in, get in the fiber optics, it'll come right here to downtown. We'll be set up and it'll be automated. And then we can repurpose those folks to go check in case a gopher chews the wires in half or something, to follow up, but not be out reading 41,000 meters a month. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Councilmember Foreman.
So I just want to resound my statements earlier because I don't think the distinction made was very well represented for the public to know. When we vote, this vote increase is not going into one pot, and then the connectivity fees are going in a different pot. They're all going in the same pot. So if this whole time we were charging adequate connectivity fees, it would have offset a lot of these issues that we're having right now. So just keep that in mind, that if our rates go up, the connectivity fees should go up simultaneously, because eventually this water rate increase that we do will go towards new infrastructure costs as well. So one pot, not separate. That's all.
And I think it's worth mentioning, there's approximately 600, we budget for 600 homes, new connections to be built per year, and at $1,000, so it generates $600,000. So even if we triple that, that's $1.8 million. And this rate increase, we need 4.7 to do the AMI, the disinfection, and the more.
Right, but everything with the
It'll
new
help. No,
homes, it's still
absolutely.
shouldered
And
on the
it's the fair share.
taxpayer.
That's right.
Right, and we're paying for it because we don't get property
That's right.
taxes to offset it. So more equitable, the better.
Yep.
That's all.
And in 15, that's how we did it too. We went for the rate increase, and we also went for the connection fees. We raised those too. Everyone needed to pitch in.
That makes me very happy to hear. Thank you.
Good.
Councilmember Hall.
So, thank you for the presentation tonight. I have had some of my questions answered with some of the discussion. So, I want to address first the comments of Councilmember Lynn, because I know our finance director has been inundated probably through not only us, but customers as well. I think we all understand that this really is unfortunate that this is happening right now. And I think one of the things that I've asked about that I'm going to just throw out again is, because of how many of these that we are hearing about from our own constituents, from social media commentary about it, I do think that we're at the point where some kind of press release or explanation or something on our homepage, on our website, some kind of statement, who to call, where the number is, so that I think we have, a customer service team in place, but people are having a hard time knowing who to call. It would avoid having it hit the action center and then having to take a next step. So I do think it would be very, very useful if we could have some kind of statement and explanation about why this is happening right now, and the fastest way for a customer, without having to go through the middleman, us, to get in front of someone in the finance department that can help them, and that they do have options, and that there is a plan to spread out payment, is what I just heard you said, right? So I do think we're at that critical point that we need to bump it up a little bit and make it a much more direct contact between the customer and the right person with the first phone number or email address. I think it'd be really helpful for everybody. So that's my comment about that. And then just considering everything that we've said already, you know, part of the challenge here is that we wait so long to go to the voters because we understand that it's an education process and we want to be really clear on what we're asking for. So I think how our voters and our residents are going to react to being asked for a water rate increase is really important to consider. And so if I understand this correctly, all three of these options will accomplish the goal of our revenue goal, right? So I understand the revenue stability. I think that's important, but to me, the two most important parts, as long as we're generating the revenue we need, is customer impact and the conservation piece. And so because we're going to the voters, because it's been such a long time, because we're in a little bit of a challenge right now of what has been happening for a lot of customers, to me, it seems like the across-the-board option, primarily because of the customer impact, would be my first choice. Because in the end, we have to convince, it doesn't matter really what we think at this point. We're going to accomplish our goal no matter which one we choose. But at this point, it's going to be really important to help our residents understand the need for this and that we are considering the impact that it has on them. And so for me, the across the board would be my first choice. Thank you.
I think, I know that we're having issues with the meter reading, which is causing bills, which is causing angry constituents. But my hope would be that when we're communicating this, we're telling people we're going to solve that with this new equipment that we're paying for. So I'm more optimistic about it passing for that reason, because I think we've seen firsthand that it's way outdated and we have to do better. So, well, we need to make a decision tonight. So let's chat. Councilmember Holman.
I did see an email a couple weeks ago, maybe from someone that got a quick response, and they said the staff was very polite and calmly walked them through it, and they really appreciate it. It was a different experience than they expected, perhaps, when contacting the city. So I think as long as, when those are coming in, if we're responding in a timely manner and we're letting them know we understand the issue, we're going to work with you to address it. And then, I think having the new, equipment and technology, because by my short calculation here, just brief, was like 5 days a week, it was like 310 readings per meter reader per day if they're working Monday through Friday the whole month. That's a lot of houses to get in the backyard or pull the thing in the front yard or whatever. That's a lot, yeah. 41,000 of those citywide and all over the city like that. And so hoping that we might be able to pitch it as we're going to be able to be more efficient, we're going to be more accurate, it's going to save time, staff time, wear and tear on vehicles, all that type of stuff is kind of the way I am approaching it. Thankfully, I haven't had any of this particular issue in my ward that I can recall. Nobody's contacted me about any of them anyway, if it has. So
May I add to something to that? Because that's a good point. The AMI also gives you that ability. If it sees, it can look at the meter reading in the night, and if it sees water going larger than normal, it lights up on the current meter reader's screen. We could repurpose them. They'll have computer screens. It will light up a red light at that residence saying, this needs to be looked at. The usage went up for some reason last night. Currently, we're on a 30-day or a 60-day before we realize the reading is larger. Mm-hmm. So it has a lot of built-in ways which saves water and makes you a better customer service person. And when you get your customer on the phone, you can look at their detailed uses and say some reason it used a lot last night at 2 a.m. That's sprinklers, or you can determine what's causing it. So it gives you a lot of ability.
Yeah, hopefully being able to detect
Yes.
leaks faster, that's
Yes.
a big, yeah. So I mean, I'm, alternative one or two is, I'm pretty comfortable with. They seem pretty neck and neck. So, I mean, don't have a majorly strong opinion towards either one of those. I'm willing to hear what other council members might have to say about it.
Do you want to start on what we want?
Yeah, go for it.
Across the board, that's the one I'm feeling if we're going to do it.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
How do you feel?
any cries of outrage?
I'm across the board.
All right,
Makes sense.
across the board, done.
Thank you.
And just so you all know, I did ask council members Studley and Peacock to watch tonight, and Brandy has texted me and said she supports across the board too, so that kind of gives you where they're standing.
All right, well, thank you for your presentation. We're done.